Commissioner Simpson,
Here.
Commissioner Mattson,
Here.
Commissioner Georgioff, Commissioner Robb.
All right. At this time, we will take any citizen communication for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone? I guess that being the case, we'll move on to agenda approval.
I move that we approve the agenda for tonight's commission meeting.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Do a little homework. So we're going to start with approval of the minutes of the August 21st Planning Commission meeting. Do we need to actually call that out as a consent item or just take it out as an item? We just say approve the minutes. Yeah. I do have a question about the minutes. It does say that it was closed by my neighbor here, Commissioner, you didn't write your name down.
Mattson.
By Commissioner Mattson, is that, he moved, made motion to close it.
Well, didn't we switch spots?
We switched spots at
I
7:12,
thought.
yeah. So,
So I had in my notes that it was moved by Brian, but that was just my notes. So
yeah, it's just,
I think I did move to close.
you
it,
did move to
but-
close it, but it said that you closed it, so I don't,
Oh,
that was,
Oh, sorry, yes, technically he didn't close it, he moved to close it.
I see what you're saying.
other than that, are you amending that? All right, so,
So I move that we approve the minutes for August 21st with the amendment.
I second.
all right. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we're gonna move on to a public hearing for our comprehensive plan. We're gonna open the public record, and this is to make recommendations on the 2025 20-year comprehensive plan. We will start with a staff report. I'm not going to ask if you have any ex parte communications for the comp plan. That's the next item on here. So.
Okay, thank you. My name is Travis Goddard. I'm the Community Development Director. Because of the number of hearings that we've done on this, I was just going to cover tonight the items that had been brought up at our last meeting and that were included in the staff report, because the document has been available for public review for a while now. And so I wanted to address the issues that had been brought up, and that is there is a list attached to the staff report of some grammar and minor edits that just needed to be done, whether it's small grammar edits or some questions. It's on that list, and I have it on the screen later, so if you want to go through that, we can. And then industrial job projections, which had been asked. Unfortunately, in my staff report, I referenced table 2. It's actually table 1, so I'll point that out when we get there. Permanent supportive housing questions and the pipeline of projects that are in the development pipeline, and then the history of flood questions were brought up. So I'll go over those real quick because they were in the staff report. So here's just the screenshot of that list that was brought to me by various planning commission members. And the ones in yellow are the ones that were covered in the staff report, and the other ones were just the minor ones that were little corrections or notifications, clarifications. And we can go through those if you want to. The industrial job projections, that's from table 1, not table 2, and the top part is the screenshot of what's currently in the text, and it talks about undeveloped commercial land and then the jobs estimates. That was from the 2022 numbers that we had, and undeveloped commercial capacity shows how many jobs are available in the commercial land, but you'll notice in the industrial land it doesn't say the total number of jobs capacity, but we clarified that, and I had a couple numbers that I wanted to talk to you about tonight. And that is, we had a 2021 study by the Port of Woodland, did in partnership with the city, and it was the 426 acres on the other side of the train tracks, the industrial area, that the port was looking at doing the tax increment financing on. And their estimate would be that there were a total of 5,000 permanent jobs that would be created in our industrial district. And during the next 20 years, they expect 10,000 construction jobs on various projects throughout the city. So those are the numbers that came up from that study.
Excuse me? Okay.
Okay, thank you. The next,
So,
sorry, before I move on, do you want to have any questions about that?
Yeah, I know your battery's dying, but yeah. So we have 350 acres of industrial land that had the 5,000 jobs, right? So, but the port was doing it on
426. And part of the discrepancy is the fact that there are a number of industrial projects, a large acreage of industrial projects that are in development at this time. So that's the discrepancy between the 426 and the 350. But it covers the same geographical.
Nobody's gone to work in that
Yep.
whole thing yet.
Yep. So the Trammell Crow, the Woodland Industrial Phase 2, and the ACTEC project are all excluded from the 426, but in the 350.
So that, running that through my head, is that 10 jobs an acre?
I believe that is pretty close to what they did. Yep. It actually works a little higher than that, and part of that is because there is a different calculation for industrial versus, or manufacturing versus like office space. So it was assumed that there would be a ratio of office space within each manufacturing or warehousing business.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And then the other question was about the definition of permanent supportive housing, which is, this is the RCW directly, and it's a lot longer than this, but I just wanted to focus on this part, and that is permanent supportive housing is subsidized leased housing with no limit to the length of stay that prioritizes people who need comprehensive support services or retain tenancy and utilizes admissions practices designed to use lower barriers to entry than would be typical for other subsidized or unsubsidized rental housing, especially related to rental history, criminal history, or personal behavior. And some of the numbers that we managed to tease out of the information that we have, and that is that there are 437 multifamily units that are in structures of 5 or more. So there are several projects on Lewis River Road that have 4 units per building, and there's multiple building like Jefferson Place, I think it's called. Those are 4 units per building, and so it's not included in this number. So there's actually more multifamily housing units in the city, but this is just the number that I could quickly tease out. And the reason why I went with these numbers is because the majority of the large projects are either Longview Housing Authority or Catholic Charities housing. And so those are the numbers that come down below. So of just the 5+ units, there are 144 units, or essentially 33% of that housing stock that is market rate. And then there's 293 units, or 67% of our multifamily 5 and plus, that is owned by the Longview Housing Authority and Catholic Charities programs, which would both meet those criteria. So in a sense, what we have is almost 14% of our entire housing stock, roughly, would meet that criteria simply because it is low barrier and supportive housing. So the city actually exceeds not only our growth projections, but we have a disproportional amount compared to the rest of Cowlitz County, in that we have such a high percentage of supportive housing.
So the RCW goes on to talk about accessibility to medical and other things, and
Yes.
with the services that are available, like I know the Catholic Charities has transportation services and everything, so that those all qualify even if you continue
Yes.
down through the requirements?
Yes, plus the Woodland Action Center, plus the local churches and the food banks. And there are no particular mental health services here in town, but that's part of that service from those other charities that transport people to those other services. So yes, for the services available in town, it meets that criteria.
Why is Woodland being singled out, basically? I know part of that is because the Catholic Charities has that whole apartment complex. However, if Longview Housing Authority is buying out our apartments, which then makes it difficult for young families and people coming into the community to get an apartment before they can buy a house, things like that, why is Woodland getting singled out for such a large proportion to carry the burden of the whole county?
One of the things I continue to point out, and that is when you're using statistics, the smaller the numbers you get, the more disproportionate it looks. And it is a function of those two organizations just happen to have money to purchase facilities, and they just happen to be the largest facilities in town. So you put 3 or 4 of them together, and it looks like a huge number just simply because we have so few multifamily housing in the city.
Okay,
So
so
part
what
of
does
it might be
Kalama have?
targeted, and part of it might just be bad luck, and part of it might just be good business decisions by those organizations. And so I want to say in my heart that it's not because we can't do anything about it, but it's just because they have the opportunity, and their mission is to provide housing, and when housing comes on the market, they just are positioned to make those purchases or construction.
At the same time, though, it drives the housing market up, and it drives because of the rate of occupancy of the apartment buildings are always at least 70%, because they are actually bought out.
Yeah.
You drive up the costs for everybody.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, and I doubt, we could look at Kalama. Kalama's a much smaller town, and I'm gonna doubt that they're at 68%,
Yeah.
67%.
Well, and that's
Or Castle Rock.
and that's why I pointed out that it's of the multifamily 5 or more, because any that are 4 or less, none of them, so 0% of those multifamily units are in the supportive or the subsidized housing. So it's kind of a function of the fact that we're so small and we only have so many projects that have more than that. And the ones that we do have that are not in that number, so the 33%, those have been constructed within the last 4 years. One of them is a 14-plex, and there's another one that's being constructed right now of 24 units, and there's another 23 that's coming online. So those are new, and it's just a function of the fact that there haven't been a lot of construction of multifamily in the city.
But there's nothing for Longview Housing Authority to turn around with every new apartment and buy 70% of those as well.
That is
Because we have building happening.
That is correct. Now, the argument that we will make if that were to occur, and I have discussed this at city council meetings before, and that is there is a social justice standard in Washington state law, and it basically is intended to ensure that no one community bears more than its fair share of the burden. So it's to prevent rich communities from basically subsidizing the purchase of projects in other communities. And the argument we would make, and that is we would be against the county or an organization buying more units, like newly constructed units, if it continues to create a hardship in our community for that exact reason. So you assume that that social equity applies for people who are challenged and need subsidized housing, but that's not necessarily true. It's a double-edged sword because there are people who are not in that category who can't afford housing because our community is unfairly burdened. That's why I specifically keep pointing out these key words, because in the future we will make an argument if we have to that we are unfairly burdened and it's a social equity issue.
How do we know when they're going to buy?
That's the hard part, right?
Because I'm assuming we don't know until
No.
after the fact.
We know when they're gonna build their own, but we don't know
Yeah.
when they're gonna buy something.
Travis, I'm just curious, do you happen to know what a more normal percentage market rate ratio would be? I'm just curious.
I do
if you
not.
know. Okay. 'Cause
Sorry.
it surprises me that only 30% of our units are market rate. I thought that was, I haven't done the research, but that's just surprising to me.
Yeah. Now, there is some discussion in the housing code which talks about the percentage of home ownership for single-family residential, and I think that number is in there, and I can take a look for that real quick if you want me to bring that up. But that is in our code, which talks about how many of our single-family homes are rentals versus owner-occupied.
And I mean, unless it's changed, one whole apartment complex, the one that is over by the Civic Center, I believe is owned by ITI, who houses their students there. So that takes a whole apartment complex out of that number of, as well.
But that would be considered market,
Yeah,
so,
but it's not available to anybody in the community. It's only available to their students.
that is correct.
So do we get any benefit from the county by having the burden of all of it here? I mean, not all of it, but
So the planner and me would argue that yes, because we have affordable housing for people in our community who need to spend less than 30% of their income on housing. Now, you get into the never-ending debate, and that is the more of it provide, are we bringing in more people to the community who make less than living wages, and therefore it's a never-ending spiral? That's a good question.
I meant like support from, like for resources from the county
Oh.
itself.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't know about that in particular. You know, that might be a question for Deanna Holland and the Woodland Action Center, because I know they are constantly working with others to share and maximize resources, but I don't get the impression that a lot of their funding comes from either the city or the county, that it's more donations and groups that donate. But I don't know the answer to that question.
They
Okay.
still pay property taxes on the real estate, and that goes to, a portion of that goes to the city, doesn't it?
I'm assuming that's
Right,
correct, yeah.
They're not exempt from taxes if they own it, right?
But yeah, it's, the other difficult question is how much of this is a function of the Growth Management Act and the fact that it constrains the housing market, so there is no true supply and demand forces on the market. It is always in a state of shortage, which drives it up. So is the question, is that caused by the market, or is that caused by the lack of or the lack of market rate housing in the city. I don't know.
It's great things to think about, for sure.
And I'd also like to point out that Dave brought up at the last meeting the fact that there are a lot of development regulations that the city needs to update. We need to increase or streamline our accessory dwelling unit process and codes to meet state law. There's also minimum density standards. There's also various missing middle housing types that we are going to be talking about in the next 6 months, about how to increase the housing stock and by adding more tools to the city's toolbox in our code, like accessory dwelling units, mother-in-law apartments, duplex, corner lots with duplexes where there's one driveway from each street face, so it looks like a single family home depending on which side of the house you're on. So there are ways that you can manage that and also add housing variety so that you could get more 4 to 6 unit developments on existing lots within the city rather than what we're currently getting, which is 4, 5, and 6 lot subdivisions on Washington and CC Street, where they're just pounding down tiny lots instead of an innovative design, because our code doesn't encourage that. So part of that'll be the next step once we kind of get over this hurdle of satisfying commerce with our update.
Anybody else? Any questions about? Okay.
Okay, so the next one is the pipeline projects. So Dave had brought up the lists that were available on the city's website. And so you see the projects on the right-hand side, Lewis River subdivision. That site was a 254 lot subdivision, or I'm sorry, apartment complex, and then they ended up getting approval for 85 single-family homes. That's what they're out there building now. The Fifth Street Apartments, or the SWAR Apartments, is 23 units. That's a multi-family project. It's a 9-plex and a 14-plex building. Alder and Ash, which is the one up behind the middle school, that's 3 phases for 150 single-family lots. Riverwalk is on the other side of the street, just down from the school. It is 48 lots, and then they've got another 17 lots that were just approved. They're starting to move dirt out there any day now, if it's not already started. There is a project right behind the right behind the corner store, and along the seawall there. It is 30 units. It's known as 1776 North Gorig, but it's actually going to have its access off of Scott across from the cemetery, not off of Gorig Street, even though that's where it's currently addressed.
Have they broke ground there?
They have not. They're working on their building designs and their engineering designs. So, but it's a little older. We just haven't seen a lot of movement out of it yet.
Is there a reason why, I mean, I know it's already been approved, but is there a reason why it's coming off Scott, which is going to create a blind driveway rather than?
Because of the seawall there, the diking district, because that is part of the dike. If they were to try and access off of Gorig, they would have to make improvements, which means they would have to work with the Corps of Engineers to remove that wall and then re-engineer the diking district dike to make sure that it can withstand floods. And so they are going to have to come off of Scott just because it's prohibitively expensive to basically recertify the entire diking district dike.
Does the seawall go all the way to the hill?
No, it actually just next to that site, it returns to the natural grade, right where it connects to the cemetery. So the actual natural grade catches up with the top of the wall and acts as the continuation of the dike as it connects into Scott Hill.
That's what I was asking, because there's that little brown house does the seawall connect to where that hill of East
That's
Scott
actually
starts?
on the hill, and there's some giant arborvitaes there, or rhododendrons there, that scare the hell out of me because they are very close to the diking district wall, and I worry about asking them to tear those down, because if that root structure were to undermine the wall, either alive or dead, worries me. So
Oh, it wouldn't be that big a leak.
Could they not have done an opening like there is across Lewis River Road, and there's also a driveway for, at least one driveway for a house that's part of that, there's an opening.
that's the next property, and it wasn't part of the development. It's a single family owner, and I don't know why they didn't acquire that property, but it may just not have been an option for them to use that driveway. Okay, so that's the 1776 North Gorg Apartments. There's also a 3-lot short plat at 1039 Park, and they are planning on building ADUs on those lots as well. So the maximum density on that could be up to 11 units. And they are designing for the ADUs right now, so we just assumed that those are going to be built. 720 Sandalwood is down by the wastewater treatment plant behind the AMPM, and it is 39 units. They are working on the engineering and the driveway approach to CC Street. And then there's another big project, which is Logan's Landing. It is a mixed-use ground floor commercial, second, third story residential. And I jokingly mentioned at the last meeting that the developer said he never wanted to talk to me again after I issued his approval, and it went through the hearings examiner. And this is that project. It was approved for up to 272 units. I had misquoted that previously. 272 units, and the problem that they have is parking. If he were to choose to build a parking garage or multi-story parking facility, he could get 272 units. He just doesn't want to deal with that, and he doesn't want to deal with the city. So it is technically, he could sell it to somebody who could build it. So it is included in the multi-family numbers that are there. So the revised number would be 275. The original number was 694. This was from the November-December 2024 snapshot. So most of that is due to Oak Village, which is on Green Mountain Road, going away. But they have a density up to, it was 186, and their maximum density now would be 99 units. But it's not approved. So the apartments came off, and then a couple new projects came onto this list.
Did that 10 acres go back into the inventories for available land?
It is. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So the Logan's Landing,
Yep.
are you totally convinced we have to leave that in there? Because they got a decision with a whole bunch of extra things they're going to have to do. They
Yep.
appealed it, which means we don't want to build this. And they lost their appeal.
Yep.
And that was in 2024, early 2024.
Yep.
So we're here at the end of 25, and they haven't applied for any fill and grade permits. They haven't done anything, and the property is on the market for sale.
That is correct.
And it cannot be any other multifamily project. If the one that was approved isn't built, which is obviously too expensive to build, it can't be residential again. So, it's the thing about it is, in the 675, that's 35% of the pipeline number. That's a real wild card.
Yes. Now, So there's a couple things that went into my thinking, and that is you're absolutely correct. If it expires without them moving ahead, those units would be completely lost. But because they do have a site plan approval, and maybe Brian can give me his opinion based on his experience, but if they came in, well, and because it is for sale, and I spend a lot of time referring people to the owner, because I get a lot of questions about that property because of the approval that is on the website. So there is interest, so for all I know, it could be sold and move ahead very quickly. And the question for Brian, and that is, once you have an approved site plan, you are vested for the regulations in effect at that time. The difficult question that we don't address well in our code, and that is, if they came back and said, okay, we would like to do a revised site plan, modify the existing site plan, and we want to do 200 units, and we want to do a 2-story parking garage, would we do that within our code? And I don't know that we would not be able to process that permit, given that their vesting is still back to the 2023 code that they applied under. So given that, and the fact that it doesn't expire for a while, not a long while, but a while, Cowlitz County will have adopted their revised comprehensive plan by the time that expires. So if they keep on track, we will have to revisit this question because of the comprehensive plan update at Cowlitz County, at which point we will know for sure whether it's dead and gone, and it would help us recalibrate for that discussion, because if the county's going to designate urban growth boundary, all of our numbers are going to have to change, and that 272 would be part of that discussion, because at that point, a year from now, I will know whether it's a fantasy or it could possibly happen.
So Travis, when does your in Clark County, it's 7 years from the date of preliminary approval, but you could submit a post-decision review afterwards to modify it under that vested code, and that's what you're talking about. I don't know if they call it a
Yes.
post-decision review.
Yes, exactly.
But when does your 7 years, but what do they have to do in that 7 years? Do they have to get the occupancy in a phase of the development?
So
What
they
do they have to achieve?
So
in
they
7
have
years?
to apply for building permits
Apply for
and
it.
get a building permit submitted within 3 years, and they have to start construction within 4 years. So I think we're kind of at like the 18 to 20 month mark, which means there really is plenty of time for them to kind of keep that lifeline going.
It sounds like it's unlikely, but you can't ignore it because you've already approved it.
Yeah.
But it sounded like that you have a point in which you have to double back anyway. So what's the harm in including it, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah.
Makes
And
sense to me.
and frankly, part of it is knowing that Department of Commerce and this update, because we've accepted money and it's going on throughout the state, they are not going to be able to treat us differently. And so it is part of our defense that we've done the full math. I'm not, ignoring some projects and counting others.
Dave,
It's
what would be the benefit of not including it? Let me ask that question.
Well, for
Does
one,
it limit us to include it? Is that?
so in my view, when you have that table 20 in the comp plan, and it shows we have we plan for 600 and some units, and here we have them all in the pipeline, and it's really a lot of justification for Cowlitz County to say
limit
you
us.
really need to expand your urban growth boundary, and maybe more than we want to. So it really kind of, because we're going to show, we're out, we're running out of land fast and faster with it.
Okay. I think I
and-
had it switched around in my head where they were going to contract us.
No,
Okay,
it
it's
would
the
be
exact opposite.
It would be the exact opposite. So that's kind of my concern in making those numbers look good. But you know, it's approved but improbable.
Well,
And-
in a small town, 272 is a big change in the percentage.
Yes.
It's just
10%.
statistical stuff you're
It's
talking about.
10%.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know, has there been a thought about it having its own category? Or does that just complicate things?
I,
You know, like,
so my answer to that would be, I don't think we want to have that, because if we go ahead and update the comp plan in a year, it was unnecessary. But let's assume the council doesn't want to update it for another 5 years. Now we've got information that is out of date in 18 months, but it might hang around for another 5, 10, or if we don't do another update until we get to our 10-year mark again, now we've got housing calculations that, or a section of housing that's not applicable. Part of me says that when it comes to the annexation discussion, the individual people requesting annexations are going to jump on this and use this as justification for expansion and project approval going forward. So the fact that it is in here, I think, just simplifies that discussion in the future, because they'll be able to analyze one set of data.
I suppose that if we do have some request for a comp plan map change or something, we could add it then as well, as long as we remember to.
Yeah, that is a good point. We could throw
We
it
could
in the
put
mix.
beside Logan's Landing, you know how you have like townhomes beside Sandalwood. You could put no permits applied for beside it or something, so
Or asterisk it.
Or
Put an asterisk with it. and the
asterisk, yeah,
footnote.
something to that effect. Maybe to
maybe
leave a note in there that helps us, you know, just kind of helps identify that 30% of the count there is probably ghost units.
So I could specifically put in there that it is a mixed-use project that has an expiration deadline.
Yeah, expires
Yeah.
March of, and with the fact that we've had code changes, that can't get an extension because the policy changed. So 3 years is 3 years. It's not going to get an extension.
Unless they do a site plan, but I can couch it in terms of the existing deadline, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think certainly you can justify revisiting a comp plan change due to a significant change in conditions, right? I mean, that seems like that's what the whole point of adjusting these things are for, right? That's a significant change in the baseline, right?
Okay, and then the last issue that was brought up, and that is the language talks about that, oh, I got these in the wrong order. Flooding was not a major issue in Woodland in the 50s and the 90s. And so what I did is AI search, and it's funny because this is an example of how you don't always want to trust AI, because the first paragraph of the AI search was the paragraph from our draft comprehensive plan, and it quoted as it wasn't a big problem between the 50s and 90s. But luckily, it was smart enough to go ahead and list all of the flooding issues in our area. And what I noticed immediately is that it talks about Columbia River flooding. And when I did a little more deep diving, that's because the Lewis River was originally dammed in 35. Merwin Dam was placed in 35, and the existing dam that's there now was completed in 1958. So it was dammed, and the Lewis River was not causing significant flooding issues back to the 30s, but the flooding that did occur was Columbia River flooding, not Lewis River flooding. So really, this gets back to the question of, if you want to suggest changes how you think that makes more sense, that may just be a
If the Columbia River
Preference.
crested at 27.7, where? Is that at the St. Helens marker?
yeah, that's part of the question. I'm not exactly sure.
Seems like the dike is at 25. It doesn't say when the Pineapple Express where the Columbia River crested at, did it?
No, it does not.
For the Columbia or for the Lewis, are you asking?
For the Columbia, I know the National Weather Service said it was gonna crest at like 27, and it said the Lewis, or the Woodland Dike's at 25. You know, and my house was at 17, and so, you know, we were looking at the worst, but it didn't get that high, didn't make it over. They put, some rows of sand down on the dike, especially out on that low end out there.
Yeah.
And kept the Columbia out, you know, other than where, there was holes in the dike.
Yeah.
It kept it out.
I'm fine with leaving it. There may have been some non-major flooding in Woodland in that 64 year, but, I mean, it wouldn't have been it wasn't a major flood like 48 or 96, so if there was flooding, it wasn't a major flood.
Yeah. And in context, what this is really kind of the first couple paragraphs describing the frequently flooded area, the fact that we are dealing with that. And then the next couple paragraphs goes on to talk about, but a lot of that prior to the 90s was before the significant amount of residential development occurred in the east side of town, which is the floodplain. And so I don't know whether or not this is a significant issue other than your personal preference, because whether it was or wasn't, it still doesn't change the fact that it's a significant challenge now, because there's a lot more of our residents are living in the floodplain.
And it affects building and building costs and everything else too,
Yes.
to
Yep.
build in the floodplain.
So I could do a couple things. I could clarify whether or not it was a major issue, or I could clarify that sentence to say that it is now a bigger issue because there are more residences that are affected by the flooding. It may just be that simple.
I don't know, to me, like, depending on the wording, it affects the people and makes it look like areas are more flood prone than they are, which just makes them want to require flood insurance for more people. And like the boundaries that have changed, like I was here in 96, I know where it flooded and where it didn't.
Yep.
And there's places that, and granted, there's been changes that are made, but you still have to crest certain things to get water to those areas.
So I would not worry about that myself, because this is a policy document, not a regulatory document. The requirement for flood insurance is actually dictated by your mortgage company, not by any city regulation. Because you technically, if you own your house outright, you're not obligated to obtain insurance. It's a condition of your mortgage quite often. So.
Well, I mean, some of the newest floodplain things that when they changed things with Merriweather and things like that are not correct where the flood stages were and what happened in 96.
Yeah.
So, but you have to have aerial photos to prove it. So I don't want to make things worse if the wording matters, I don't wanna make things worse.
So we could also just simply say this: while flooding was an issue in Woodland. We don't have to say whether it's a major issue or not. We can just recognize that there were flood events, and maybe the problem is.
And we realistically, we've mitigated a lot of those with the way that we've done builds.
My property is mitigated.
Sharon was right there, right?
Yep.
So our goal tonight is to make a recommendation to council, right?
Yep.
So, will you do me a favor, Travis? Like, you're talking about, we could just say this, can you write down some of these changes that you're suggesting that we're not, like, we're tacitly kind of approving because we're not fighting against it, and like, that makes sense or whatnot, so that when somebody does finally move, we can include the changes. Do you know what I'm saying?
So for this case, I think the simplest fix would be to just change the language to say, while flooding was an issue in Woodland, so I would take out not a major. So it would be, while flooding was an issue in Woodland from the 1950s to the mid-90s, residential development in East Woodland floodplains and surrounding hills raised concerns.
I'm
'Cause-
down with simpler is better, but
Because that
That's
just
just my-
removes the whole judgment call from whether it was major or not.
Yeah.
It was an issue because it occurred.
I just
Whether
wanna
it's a
make sure
positive
that
or a negative?
At the end of the night, we have something that we've all kind of agreed on for the changes. Like the asterisk or somehow identifying the Logan Place, whatever. You know, these small changes that we seem to be agreeing with as we go along, if you could write those down. Because I'm not gonna remember them all.
That's all being recorded in the minutes. Was that the last one on the worksheet?
That is the last one on my presentation, but I have it prepared to go through the items on the spreadsheet that were raised by the grammar edits, if you want to dive into that. Or you want me to just run through them quickly? I don't know if you've all had a chance to look at them and look them up.
Who's good at grammar?
Sharon is.
I did a lot of them already. I'm okay with them because
I think Whitney pointed out a couple of them last time too, so I would
Yes.
expect that nothing's gonna get by that side of the dais here.
And yes, whoever pointed that out, the steamer Lucia Mason sailed from 1883 to 1891, not
I
1991.
think that was you, Dave.
That was impressive quality.
Pointed out the
Control.
1891,
Yeah.
not 1990.
No, that one.
Yeah.
If any of the other commissioners feel the need to go over the grammar stuff, I'll do it, but I
I've-
don't want to.
I read it all, you know, it looks like the fixes are there, so.
And
As-
I would like to point out that the ordinance that has been drafted and sent to Commerce, it includes a caveat that says the clerk is authorized to make grammar and changes to both the ordinance and the comprehensive plan, so that if anybody ever spots a missing period or too many
Yeah, I saw that.
commas, that we can
Yeah.
fix that. And then there's the second half there.
So is that the end of your,
That's it, unless you have
Presentation.
specific questions you want to talk
so
about.
do we have, thank you for the staff report. This is a public hearing, so we can take public comments at this time. If anybody would like to comment on the comp plan draft, we'll open it up for public comment.
You can't come all this time and not make.
No, I like the questions they're asking, I like the discussion I'm hearing. I feel good about it, it's what you guys are all thinking about and concerned about. Thank you.
We don't have anybody online that could
No, I
ask.
check.
I'm getting used to this.
You're doing good, you're doing great.
You're doing great.
Well, thank you. All right, thank you, but we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of the meeting. And I think if everybody's satisfied, we can go ahead and take some action and,
So this is to send it to the council, right?
yeah, as amended.
Yeah.
So moved.
There you go.
Second.
Okay,
So who made the motion? Oh, Whitney?
Motion been made and seconded. For this one, I'll ask Beretta to take the roll.
Commissioner Georgioff?
Yes.
Commissioner Mattson?
Yes.
Commissioner Simpson?
Yes.
Commissioner Watt?
Yes.
Commissioner Robb?
Yes.
You
I'm-
paused for a minute, I thought you were gonna be contrarian for a second.
No, actually, I think I'm just supposed to break a tie.
Oh,
That's,
is that right?
I think
I didn't know that.
theoretically, yeah.
yes. So as long as you kids get along. That's the bad thing about being chair is actually you don't have a vote unless it gets down to the nitty gritty.
You can influence people with your sheer presence and command of the process.
Well, thank you. Okay, speaking of command of the process, we have this workshop for our rules and potential rule changes on our planning commission rules. So we'll get a little staff report.
I looked at this briefly and I didn't know what the changes were. Maybe I didn't have the previous one memorized.
So I had actually not prepared a staff report because you hadn't had the discussion at this point, and I wanted you to give me directions what you would like me to consider updating or having legally reviewed, et cetera, et cetera.
So the rules that I think I got from you and printed off a while back are the same as in the packet this time?
They are.
Okay.
The only thing that has changed is the potential date, should you decide to want to print them and sign them in 2025. Everything is back to the 2018 with no changes, so that it's an open ball field.
Like I said before, I looked at it and I'm not aware of any changes that I've wanted from it, right? So,
I have some questions.
Okay.
Okay, so on the first page, the section about the meeting notices, you know, there's times, a certain amount of time that things are supposed to be published before the meeting, which doesn't happen.
You're talking about the staff report or the public
Okay, so-
notice?
Keep, go down. Okay, meeting notices and agenda. Provided 2 weeks in advance.
Yes, we need to work on that.
I mean, I understand that it's, you know, there's difficulties. Maybe you need to change the times to what's actually
So
doable.
is that supposed to be just for what we publish for a public hearing? Is that what that means, or is that?
So,
Because to say back in the day, but back in the day, back when we would have 6 comp plan change requests in a year, in a cycle, I kind of laid down a rule that we would get our packets 7 days prior to the meeting because it was a lot of stuff. And furthermore, we did not accept late information from a applicant or developer. We used to have a developer come in here, applicant come in here, and walk along and hand everybody papers right at the start of the meeting. That's supposed to change everything, and us not get time to study and give it any merit. And I finally just walked along and picked them all back up, took them back to him, and said, "We have a 7-day rule. You should know about it. We can't, we have our packet. We've studied it. Do you want to postpone your public hearing or whatever?" So that was very good. Travis knows I'm kind of one that I kind of like to get my packet early, and I heard a comment made about city council people that don't read their stuff. Well, are they getting it soon enough? That's kind of my question. I can't find my stuff that I had in mind. Do I have a copy of
Travis,
that?
to Sharon's point, do you need a smaller window in order to be able to do it?
So here's the thing.
Because if you do, then you should request that in your staff report.
So if there is a public hearing, the notice is issued more than the 2 weeks in advance, simply because it goes to the paper and it's posted as required by code more than the 2 weeks in advance. Now, where we are falling down here, and also technically, through the end of the year when the planning commissions are scheduled, so technically that's part of that as well. Now, where I'm falling down, and that is I'm not always producing staff reports and packets 10 days before the meeting. Now, how we've worked around that is I regularly, the day information comes in, I update the city's website. So there is a ton of information available, but again, the staff report that I delivered to you with just less than a week ago is really the smallest part of the information, but I am clearly not meeting the 10-day requirement because you should have had it last Monday instead of last Friday.
So, without hurting anybody's feelings, but going and figuring out that something was updated on the city website is a chore for the 20 projects are there. Don't expect us to go through and look at every one and see if there's been an update to anything. Yep. There might be a new project on there that we notice, but an email that there's been a new project put or a change to something, would help. I think everybody's doing email, but the city's website's very cumbersome. It just is. Those of us that have played in it long enough know how to work with it a little bit, but I feel sorry for John Q. Public that has to go try to find something. My wife was looking for the application for the park board so she could share a link with it, and you had to click on something and click on something else and click on something else and click on something else, and then there it was, and she said, "How did you find it?" I said, "Well, I'm kind of used to this. It's, it wasn't even in the normal place. It wasn't even under park board. It wasn't, so the projects are just as tough. So if we can get something that tells us,
Sure. Okay.
there's a public, if you send public notice to the newspaper, put us on the list or something as well.
Okay. So I can make a point to include you in more emails for updates on projects. One of the things I think we used to do that might have been overkill, and that is we copied the planning commission on any notice of application or decision that went out I still currently do that with the city council. When a decision is made, I'll CC them. But the one shortcut I do want to point out, and that is if it's something the city generates, like the comp plan update or zoning code changes or amendments to the code, or for example, like the marijuana retail sales, if it is a comp plan and a zone change amendment that would come before the planning commission, the address where you will find that information is always under the City of Woodland City Hall address, because City Hall is essentially, when you talk about like the marijuana retail sales code amendment, it is under the 230 Davidson for City Hall. So if you wanted to see an update on that project, because it is a code amendment, it's not associated with a particular property in town. It lies at City Hall. That's why when you open up the map, you see 7 permits at City Hall. It's because it's the comp plan update, it's the sign code update, it's text amendments. So it helps you at least find the City of Woodland stuff. That doesn't tell you what's been updated, though.
I'd rather see it in my email.
Okay.
Then, I check my email every day. I don't go check the city dot on the website every day.
Okay.
So, I guess I can't find my copy, but what page is that? How far from the top are we right there?
It's on the first page. It's at
That's
the
on
bottom
the-
of the first page.
Yep. Almost at the 2/3 of the way down the first page.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go to the second page. I had a question about something.
Okay.
Okay, stop there.
Okay.
A chairperson will work with staff to review meeting agendas. I believe that means that I would review the agenda with you before it was published.
You want to start doing that?
Yep.
Okay.
And another thing the RCWs say is that we do get to make our own rules, by the way. And we get to run the meetings the way we want to run the meetings. I don't mind this format, make sure we ask for public comment on anything not on the agenda and things. But I actually try to run a pretty friendly and open meeting where if somebody wants to say something sometime, as long as they're not out of context on something, let's hear what they have to say. But
I've never seen that happen, to be honest. In
anything
my time
out
here.
of context?
No, I mean, not letting people speak.
Right.
As non-formal as we can be, I think that we've always been pretty accepting of hearing any testimony that anybody wants to offer.
We had a year where we had several rezones, and we had findings that, for one rezone, they wanted to go from commercial to residential, and they had findings that said we were short on residential and thick on commercial. And then we had another project that wanted to go the other way, and they had findings that said the exact opposite. And we had something someplace that had this poor little gentleman, and he was upset, and he was in his 80s, and he stepped up to the mic, and we were having a public hearing for, item number 1, and he was talking about item number 4, and we just let him talk about it, and then I explained to him that, we're not going to be making a decision on what you're talking about right now, but we are going to be here tonight, And after that, I had staff, because when staff does the papers they put out, when we have like a big night of rezone, because I would have the staff, I want 1 in green, 1 in blue, 1 in yellow, you know, at least a cover sheet so I can see which paper they're holding that they're, you know, talking about. But it's, you know, been a long time since this room's been full,
Yeah.
but hasn't it, Sharon? But anyway, I think everything looks good. If you guys think everything looks good,
Okay, I have a couple other things.
you guys.
Yes, at the top of page 2, when it's talking about vacancies, oh, yeah, okay. Very
I
at the top.
saw that.
The vacancy shall be filled by members of the planning commission. That's not what happens.
No, and I don't think that's part of the RCWs. Actually, I saw that too. I forgot about it. We probably need to change that. So, caused by the resignation or removal of an officer will be filled for the remaining term by majority vote of members of the planning commission, and that's not even in the Woodland Code. That, you know, it's
I didn't notice
It's
that.
always
didn't
been,
notice
it's
that.
never been like.
no, it's never been like that. That's
And the code actually specifically says appointments by the mayor
And
with
approved by-
confirmation by
yeah.
the council.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then down at the bottom of the second page, when they're talking about, okay, yeah, planning commission members must be present to vote. Because of, okay, no proxy. But when you say they must be present, does that preclude somebody being online and being able to vote?
That's a good question you should discuss and propose a fix for.
Because I just attended the library district board meeting, and, you know, there were some people there that were online and they were voting.
Boy, we're gonna have to have some mastery of that system.
Well, I mean, you know,
But you know, you're right. Especially we learned that a few years ago.
So if
I guess we could add a sentence that says, Zoom meeting,
remote attendance.
participation in a Zoom meeting means you're present.
So I think how the council does it is if there's somebody on the remote attendance, somebody in the quorum in the room has to say, make a motion, I vote that we suspend our rules to allow for remote attendance, and then they would be considered as a voting member as part of the quorum and can participate, but that's based upon the approval of the people who have attended. Would you like me to find language or draft language for you to look at the next meeting for that?
Or we can just decide that we want to allow it.
Yeah, we can make a pink one of these for it, or maybe put a yellow one on the back of this. And, you know, should it ever come up.
yeah, it doesn't happen all that often, I don't
But
think.
that isn't,
If we start having late night ones like we did, the allure of doing this from home might be greater and greater. I'm just saying.
I don't know. Sometimes you want to look people in the eye. You know, this says the meeting ended after 40 minutes of idleness. Join meeting? Is that everything?
Yeah.
That's everything?
That's
Have
all
we
I have.
settled that? We can,
Anything else on this one?
No, I'm okay. I'm okay with the rest of it.
of interest, appearance of fairness, all that stuff.
I don't think I have any of those, but yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
they,
those are normal in
So
government and workplaces, so.
the
yeah.
Planning Association of Washington has what's called a short course on local planning, and it includes not only the basics of current planning laws, but also conflicts of interest, appearance of fairness, ex parte training. So I will send you all a link to the next meeting that comes along, and I think they might be doing one locally pretty quick, so you might be able to get a chance to actually attend it in person. But I will send that in the link,
Okay.
especially because a couple of you are new and it's been a while, Dave, so you'll all get the opportunity to brush up.
Probably not.
Need to call customer service.
I'm more tech savvy than my grandma, but that's not saying much.
I don't know what this.
If you don't know what it is, click on it.
I'm just guessing, probably, how come it doesn't even. See, what I did there is I just clicked on something.
Either that or you turn it off and turn it on.
Right, that's my whole standby, turn it off.
Was the mayor not hearing me? Or not hearing anything, or?
Normally he would text me if there was a problem.
I know.
You weren't the chosen one today.
Okay. Okay, wait, what's that?
So we gotta plug it back in too.
Is there a chat function where they can? I know with Teams you can let people in, right? That just shows up as a prompt and then you let them in.
And so you see the name there and it says admin.
Yeah.
What is his?
Gonna have to learn a new program.
Do you maybe want to take a break?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay.
So, are we gonna do any pomp and circumstance of that, or wait till the end of the meeting and sign that paper for the rules?
I think
Wh-
the corrections have to be made first.
Yeah,
Okay, okay,
it's only workshop.
okay, we're workshopping, okay. All right, so the next workshop is for zoning text amendment discussion. So go ahead with the staff report there.
Sorry, let me take a quick look and see. Okay, so the documents that you have before you was from a case that was started in 2024. It came before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission made a recommendation to the City Council, but the City Council never acted on it. So he asked me to bring it back to the Planning Commission to determine whether or not this Planning Commission would like to make a new motion on that, since it hadn't been acted on. But the applicant has requested multiple zone change requests to make various versions of the zoning code allow for the retail sales of marijuana. The initial application was for it to be allowed in the industrial and commercial zones, and then in the end, it was narrowed down to the Planning Commission had made 3 recommendations of approval, and the City Council had declined to make those changes. And in the last round in 2024, he simply requested that the zone change apply to only the highway commercial zone. And there was a map that shows if you were to do a zoning change amendment that would allow for retail sales, this is the map that would apply. And the areas in red are either school schools or churches or daycares where you are not allowed to operate retail sales of marijuana within a certain distance of. So it shows the highway commercial zones where it would not be allowed. And this was informational only. It's not regulatory from the city's point of view. This is Liquor Control Board standards. Right now, our code still says marijuana retail sales are prohibited. So unless you would like to make a change to that recommendation, this would go forward to the city council again with the 2024 recommendation.
So, the 2024 recommendation was never put on agenda? Did it get a first reading and not a second? What,
They failed to act on it, which basically means they never formally issued a decision. So it never got to the first reading. It got there and died without getting born.
so, if it got a first reading and not a second reading, it would be considered dead?
Yep.
But if it never got a first reading, it's still considered active? Or is,
Well, so in this case, they never asked me to even assign it an ordinance number for them to vote on. So from a land use permit point of view, the fact that they didn't take action on an ordinance, a vote up or down, means that the land use case was still active.
so, then this guy paid for a zone change request
Yes.
again?
Yes, he's actually paid
So-
for
So this
4.
time, what he paid for was, I mean, because we don't even have a fee structure for sending a dead recommendation back, do we?
So in 2024, he paid $2,500 for a zoning text amendment and never got a decision for his $2,500. In 21, 22, and 23, he also paid those fees, but got a denial by the city council.
So, okay, I have two things I want to say. I don't care what the vote is, but if he paid his money, he deserves a vote. I feel strongly about that. To do nothing, I don't agree with that. I just don't agree with it. The second thing I wanted to say, we have three new commissioners. I don't think it would be fair for them to get behind a previous recommendation that they didn't have a vote on. So that's just what I wanted to say.
So you could direct me to advertise for a public hearing and bring it back to you in the October meeting, and then you could I could do a full presentation and the background and provide you a staff report and allow you to take a vote in October. Is that
I took a vote last time because I feel that if you paid your money, you deserve a vote, and I still feel that way. So I would do it again if the other commissioners want to.
So why did you bring this forward now? Is the owner asking again?
he asked me to reintroduce it because he wanted it discussed.
And he paid the fees again?
No, he did not pay again.
Oh, okay.
This is still under
But
the
he
existing
paid
permit
it
number.
before and he never got a vote. So
That's correct.
I still think that.
It's like going to the hearings examiner, but the hearings examiner not issuing a decision.
I was gonna say the same thing that, you were saying. I think with 3 new commissioners, to take a vote on something that happened a year ago, shouldn't be. I was under the assumption the guy paid again to ask for a code change again, because that's why I made the phone call the other day to find out how much it costs to make a code change. You know, so I was under the assumption that this was paid again, and that's what kind of I was searching around for that. You know, typically we see the paperwork of the receipt kind of stuff, you know.
Yep.
Are we,
So I think, I agree that if he paid his money, he should have got a vote, and that's really like not much business of ours as city council. I guess they have the right to table it too, but that's none of our.
Are we obligated to, are we obligated in any way to abide by the previous vote?
No.
Okay, good. So we-
Because
we
it
can
is a
change-
recommendation,
okay,
you can
okay.
change your recommendations
Okay.
as you see fit.
Well, yeah, I agree that he should have gotten his money's worth, but I mean, we could send it to the council again and the same thing could happen.
Right, we might have a different recommendation too.
True.
I mean,
True. Is the council,
So go ahead.
is the council composition different than?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, then there's that.
I think in all fairness, Whitney and Dave and Cliff should get to vote on it. If we're gonna make a recommendation and they're part of the board, that seems to be a no duh to me, but.
Right.
So it says staff to amend the recommendation. He's wanting to drop the highway commercial. This is a,
I think he wanted to drop the highway commercial and make it just commercial, one of the commercial levels.
No, he wanted to drop the other commercial zones and only ask for highway commercial.
Okay.
Because it was a shotgun
That's the
approach
zoning of
last
the
time.
current place, that last place he was operating in.
And the debate in 2023 was whether or not it would be preferred in an industrial district, because there are less kids and families traveling through our industrial district. And that's why he said, okay, I will throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And in the end, what he really wanted was the highway commercial, because he thought it was a good compromise to see what the council was willing to give him. And since they said no outright, the next time around, he said, then I will ask for what I'm specifically wanting and hope that the new council will have a new opinion on that application.
In my opinion, this is gonna be an ongoing issue until either council decides or they put it up to an advisory vote for the citizens to choose. Because my understanding of the situation is, in order for him to continue to keep his license issued for the state, since he doesn't have a facility that is currently open, he has to have movement going to be able to, otherwise he loses his licensure. He can't just move to a different place because of when he was in Kelso, he got the land was taken by, I believe, eminent domain.
Condemned.
Yeah, and so that's what took his original license away. He was offered Woodland, Kalama, or Castle Rock, all of which had moratoriums against it, which, to me, for the state to offer that is bizarre to start with. But my understanding is that this is gonna continue to go back and forth until it eventually, either he gives up or gets decided one way or the other, is my understanding.
I'm not an attorney, right, but it seems to me that if your legislative or your administrative board chooses to take no action and you lose your license as a result, could that open us up to some sort of liability? Maybe, I don't know. But I agree with Whitney that a vote, he needs a vote. I think so.
That is a
That's
good.
just my opinion.
Yep. And that's part of the reason why I agreed to bring it back to you, because I wasn't sure exactly how that landed. So the fact that it is still here and it is still an active case, he can make the argument that he's still pursuing that. And so that's why we're back here before you today.
so if it was never given never put on a agenda.
It was on the agenda, they just didn't take a vote. So no action was taken. That's my.
So it was tabled?
That's my recollection. Yep,
Okay.
yep. Death by black hole.
And then, so where can I go through and find out when something's tabled? But I know sometimes if something's tabled for a period of time, it's considered dead.
Yep. The council would have to take action to bring it back. It is functionally dead because no action is taken.
Functionally dead, but not statutorily dead.
From a land use point of view, that is not an acceptable answer because the land use process under LUPA is, it is considered an actual active application until a land use decision is issued. And so since we process zoning text amendments under section 19 and 17 of our city code, we treat it under the land use,
So
as a land use application.
So then those rules apply, the land use.
That's a legal question, I don't know for sure. But yes, it is still an open case in our permit processing software.
Well, I do believe it's city council's decision. You know, I'm a tiebreaker. I guess I'll take a poll. Is that something you guys want to vote on? And
Well, we can
And
do
s-
it with a move and a second, right?
yeah,
I move that you put it on the agenda for October's meeting, and we'll discuss it, and if we wanna, I don't know, if we wanna vote that night on a recommendation, I guess we could, if you think that's too fast and you wanna do a work,
No,
okay.
this will not take a lot of work because I've several years of staff reports that I
Okay.
can
So
cut and paste from.
I move that we discuss this in October and vote in our recommendation at that time.
Second?
all right, motion's been made, seconded.
Do you want to have a vote on this? Do you think it would be?
We could just, you don't have to call names, we can just say one at a time, we find out the ayes from the noes.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yep.
Starting with you, Whitney.
Aye.
Aye.
There we go, unanimous.
I didn't know if somebody was not down with that plan, and I didn't know if they wanted to voice their. That's the only fair way to do it. It's a divisive issue, so I know that.
The guy paid his money, let's
Right.
give him a day in court.
Right. Agreed.
Okay. Says here staff reports.
In this
got
case,
any-
in this case, I don't have any.
You don't have any tire kicking you can talk about?
So I can talk about our current project workload. So on North Pekin at 345 North Pekin, Trammell Crow has started on their development of two large warehouses. They are going to be the largest building in town, and so if you want to drive by, you can see that construction. Immediately west of that, there is an additional industrial park on Rose Way that is under construction as well. So you can find those both on the website.
I thought that was
Can-
one big complex when I was
can-
driving by Pekin.
Can I ask a question there
Yep.
on that region? Because years back, we put in the code somewhere that those big oak trees would try to be preserved as much as possible. And I started looking for it, and I couldn't find it the other day. Has that been removed from the code?
So I haven't seen that, but I have worked with the developer in both of those cases, and when they do the frontage improvements to finish Gorig, you'll notice the site next door, which is the new USNR location. In the root zone of those oak trees, instead of cutting out and doing paved sidewalks, they actually have dirt and pavers. so that there is not damage to the root zone in those for those oak trees. So they have done everything they can to preserve those beautiful oaks, and it's going to be kind of a pain for street maintenance because all those trees will fall, or all those leaves will fall on the street. But that was my one heart's desire, to preserve those oak trees.
Somebody-
And
It's the drip line, right?
yeah,
Somebody told me one of them, that oak tree got cut down. I don't know which one it was. I didn't go by there, but I don't know. But I do know we did have code to try to save not cottonwoods but oak trees.
now there
And-
were some cedar trees, some really funky, huge cedar trees
Yeah,
that were short
yeah.
and stubby. Those ended up getting
Yeah.
cut down, but the oak trees were preserved.
Okay.
And
So
they-
then, did you say the new site for USNR?
Yeah.
Are they
And-
expanding or moving?
Moving, I think they expanded, and so moved to a second building.
Wow.
Yep.
Since you're talking about the Tramwell building, I have a question. Being new on the planning commission, I'm wondering how to bring things that I would like discuss that would be new business to the board. Do I need to put it on the agenda? Or is there's nowhere on the agenda where we bring up new things? That's not on the agenda.
No,
So-
but I was gonna ask, and always, if we get a motion to adjourn, like the other night, I jumped in there with that. I wanted to get some some state code in the minutes. Jump in there for sure if I forget. But yeah, no, that is important. That we have ideas or questions or things we want to work on. We can talk about that.
Yeah, 'cause I have 3, so.
And
So,
so
do you mind if I weigh in on this real
Sure.
quick? So, I guess at the end you could ask if there's any comments, and you can bring them up. They would be directed to me, not the planning commission, because technically the planning commission's agenda is set by the mayor. It is not set by the planning commission itself. So I do have authorization for an ongoing program that I call Retooling Our Code. And Dave asked about it, and I sent him a copy of that list. I'll send it to the rest of you. But it's essentially a running list of everything from spelling, grammar corrections, to code sections that you would like to address. And because it is policy related, theoretically, it needs to be directed to the planning commission, not self-appointed. But I have this running list, and you can throw anything you want on it, and I bring it up with the mayor and the council for them
So,
to look at.
outside of that, yes, there might be some code things we want to address, but outside of that, we're going to get back to meeting with when we have the new city council. We're going to get back to meeting with the new city council to talk about goals and workloads and things, and if there's things you have that aren't really code, but things that we should talk about bringing up in that meeting, we should talk about those, and we can do that. But otherwise, most of our workload comes from what the city council and mayor want us to do, or what people have paid to have us do with their requests. But I'm gonna work on some city unity, and honestly, Sharon will attest to this. Back in the day, the planning commission did a lot of work and was a resource. It wasn't we see what comes in and we rubber stamp it and we move it on or whatever. It was a resource, and a lot of code's been written over the years, and a lot of things have been done, and hopefully a lot of things done better for the city. And we've done some big projects, even code-wise, but we can talk about those at the end of the meeting, in an open public meeting, right? And put together a list of things that we would like to discuss with the city council about accomplishing, to make things better for the city. So,
Yeah, I mean, when we have met with them for, that I remember, they asked us what
Yes, yes.
what we wanted
So,
to see.
It- there was kind of 8 years that all fell apart, and I think it's time we can put it back together. You know, if that's the most polite way of putting that. Travis's battery's running low. But anyway, any other new stuff for staff report?
There is, so we have been talking with a couple developers about potential parks and recreation opportunities. Pacific Core owns the fish release site at the north end of town across from the middle school, and they are considering creating a park on that location, and it would be immediately adjacent to the River Walk, which has a condition of approval that they provide a access point to the river, to the Lewis River. And so I'm trying to get the two of them to work together so that Pacific Core can meet some of their relicensing requirements by providing access to the Lewis River. And then we have the new school zone in front of the middle school. So there's the possibility that we could get crosswalks on 503 now that there's a school zone.
Do you mean North Fork Elementary?
Is it
It's an
is it an
elementary
elementary now?
The middle school is still a middle school.
Okay.
That's on Park Street.
Okay.
It-
I just
Yeah.
want to make
It's
sure
changed,
It's
we're
hard
talking
to
about
keep up.
Yeah. So now with the Alder and Ash, there is now a pedestrian connection from all of those neighborhoods over there. You can come through the school site, use a path into the parking lot. Eventually, you would be able to get across the street to the Lewis River. And then we're working on a Safe Routes to School project that would get us from the school down to the roundabout. And so hopefully before long you will have a pedestrian connection that would get you all the way to Horseshoe Lake and potentially around Horseshoe Lake all the way from the elementary school and all of that neighborhood. So
I thought that when they were doing the hearing for, I can't remember what the project name is, the Sandlot.
yep.
I thought when they were doing the hearing, I thought the state specifically said that they did not want crosswalks going across Highway
Yes.
503.
Yeah, so it's kind of odd because also we had asked that question when the 150 lots of Alder and Ash was approved as well, and they said, no, we do not want a sidewalk there. And then
By we, you mean WASDOT?
WashDOT did not want pedestrians because the concern is that once you have a button-activated crosswalk, it affects regional transportation issues because now if that button gets stuck, nobody can get past that sidewalk without stop-and-go traffic. And so there were issues associated with that, plus the speed of people coming out of the county into the city. But now with the school zone, the police department is better able to enforce speeding. And so once people get trained that they need to go slower, well, but I get sidetracked because I used to work with the planner in Clark County, who is now the DOT planner. And when he took his new job at the DOT, first week he called me and said, hey, how you doing? Long time no see. Why is there no sidewalk? And I said, well, because DOT said they didn't want a sidewalk, and they've now added it to their work plan to add a sidewalk.
You mean crosswalk?
A crosswalk, yep, sorry, crosswalk.
Okay.
So DOT is now open to that, where they were not at the time that application went in.
Could they possibly do turn lanes at the same, before
Well,
they
the
put crosswalks?
turn lanes were installed by Alder and Ash. They did a right turn lane in, and then they have a left turn lane in. So those widening projects were done by the subdivision on that side.
I thought you were talking about they wanted a crosswalk at the Sandlot.
Oh, yeah.
I
No.
think- What is that called? The actual name?
Lewis River subdivision.
Lewis River subdivision?
Yep.
I thought you were saying that they wanted a crosswalk there.
Well, so we had talked about that, but we couldn't get the alignment to either Gun Club or Insel, so they did a mid-block crossing, and they won't allow a sidewalk at mid-block crossing. But as part of the Safe Routes to School, we may eventually get another one at that part of the road connection. But in the meantime, what we're trying to get is the north-south sidewalk on one of the sides of Lewis River Road. That's the Safe Route to School. Once that goes in place, we'll be better positioned to argue for additional crosswalks at other locations. But right now, part of DOT's concern, and that is they don't want a crosswalk at a random spot, because then it will encourage people to start crossing the highway, which means they'll be walking up and down the side of the highway to get to the crosswalk. So that's kind of why they've always been reluctant to allow. But now that the sidewalk is starting to fill in and we're going to get long stretches of sidewalks on both sides, it'll improve our funding capability for the Safe Routes to School improvements, and we're getting there.
Okay. Anybody have any closing thoughts?
So, I do. So, this, I noticed that Centralia had passed through their, I'm not sure if it went through the city council yet or their planning commission, but a moratorium on the large warehouses like Tramwell is building, since they're basically building those and leaving them vacant, which there's no one intended, there's no one in Longviews yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the things that I would be interested in pursuing as well, because that doesn't help jobs or anything. That just takes away the ability for any commercial or industrial businesses to come in that would actually supply jobs, is to build a vacant warehouse for nothing. And then my second thing is something I've talked to Travis about in the past, but it's a state thing that's been going on for a couple years, where they have been moving sexually violent predators out of the McNeil Island and into these LRA accommodations, so it means less restrictive accommodations. And when they do it, they do not have to meet the criteria that when someone is released from jail has to meet. So Tenino went through this, and I would like to try to get coding set up so that should it happen in our community, that they can't be built just anywhere, because without having it already in our code, in other places that they've built them, they've been built next to schools, they've been built next to bus stops, and the police are not notified. They do not have to go through any of the requirements that any of the other offenders who are released from jail have to go through. And so I'd like to be proactive, and like if something like that is to get built, that it's only allowed in whatever code area that we would like to. And then my last thing is there's been communities that have been looking at banning a substance called 7-OH. It's made from the kratom plant. It's similar to an opioid that kids are overdosing on. It's sold at a lot of vape shops. It's sold at gas stations. It's marketed as an energy thing, all kinds of different things. But the FDA is looking at banning it, but it's not yet been banned. But it's something that communities have banned, because it's an addictive substance that's an opioid-like, and it also creates withdrawals that are pretty severe. And so,
What's this called again?
7-OH. I can give you the actual name for it. It has a long name. It's made from the kratom plant, which is KRATOM.
Never heard of kratom.
The actual name for it.
I probably couldn't spell the actual name.
Yeah, but it goes by 7-OH. I'm on the poison alert thing. It doesn't have the whole name on it. Oh, 7-hydroxynitrogenine. started to even see overdoses happening in our community, even being as small as it is, because there's no warnings out there that because it's a plant substance that the FDA hasn't caught up to it yet, and so that's
Do you have much interaction with the police chief to talk to him about that and find out if that's in our wheelhouse?
Yes.
Or, but if we can look at that,
Whitney, if you could send me an email with the information that you do know about it,
Yeah.
and then I'll forward that on to the chief and ask him what he knows about it, and I'm sure they're talking about it in their circles.
yeah.
So somebody will know how it's been handled in other communities,
Yeah.
and that'll help.
Yeah, the overdoses for 2025 in the first 6 months were double what for children what it was in all of 2024. So it's something that's rapidly being found out by young people
Wow.
that's out there, and so
as far as the big box warehouse thing, there's some verbiage in our comp plan, at least our old comp plan, about goals for jobs per acre for the industrial and goals for jobs per acre for the, and once we get the comp plan approved, that might be something we want to codify, maybe with some emergency code that says, kind of have to prove jobs per acre a little bit. I agree with you. These companies are building these big warehouses, and then the big equity firms are just buying them.
yeah.
And it's, other than the fact that the property taxes are going up and there's no additional traffic,
Yeah.
there's not much positive to that because there's not more employment. So I think step one, get our comp plan done, and then step two would be put that on our list for meeting with the new council, for sure.
I don't I'm struggling to, I'm not doubting that this is occurring, but I'm struggling to understand how that is a sustainable business model. To do all the frontage improvements and build this giant building, and then you sell it to somebody else and they don't do anything with it.
And
You can't do that forever.
You
You're
know-
gonna run out of money, so I don't understand how they can do that.
So down at the Port of Portland, on Marine Drive, there's warehouse after warehouse along there that's empty. And I know one of the port commissioners for Port of Portland, and I asked him, hey, is the Port of Portland, how many of these do they own and not have customers in? Because even CarQuest Parts Distribution was down there, they just left, and
Well, I know the
You know-
carriers don't show up there anymore, so that might be part of the problem, right?
no, these warehouses are, I don't know what you mean by carriers, but
Like the longshoreman guy.
the
doing
container
whatever,
ships are, the
yeah.
container ships are docking. It's not that. These buildings are just empty, and I asked him about it. He goes, he told me what buildings the port did own in those speculative warehouses there, but he said, all those buildings you drive past that are empty, those are all owned by Blackstone and those big investment companies, and they can, tax-wise, it's a deal somehow. Either
Don't
you
know how.
you pick that up and you start
Some kind of
depreciation or whatever it is. There's some kind of shelter in it.
Yeah, I was up at Cowlitz County and they were discussing it, and they said that when that was built, it was built into the funding model that they could have 3 years empty. And then they, at that time, because inside that building, there's no bathrooms, there's nothing.
Right,
No,
it's just
yeah.
a shell.
Just there, a shell.
Yeah.
So it's the funding, and it was mainly from Japan, Japanese funding
Yeah.
for that in Longview.
Yeah, so they got 3 years to sell it.
Got 3 years to.
But you're just
Yeah.
losing money for 3 years by not renting it to somebody.
Yeah,
I'm so
but
naive, I
it's-
can't understand how this works, I guess.
But it's happening. So anyway, that's kind of what I know about that. But we should look at it. Sharon, you got anything new?
Nope.
I'm just reactionary.
You're
I can talk
reactionary?
about everybody else's stuff.
All right. Nothing? You're following Brian? All right. Well, I think I've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about that's going to be new and hopefully different. And like I say,
Then
I
I move
think
that we adjourn.
the planning commission. I want to say it one more time,
Okay,
though.
all
I
right,
think
all
the
right,
I think the planning commission can and should be a more active part in the things that are happening with the city and the unity of the city. And I know even the Port of Woodland wants to be back to working with the other agencies and everything. And so we just gotta pull this all together and everybody work together and get things done that are good for the city. So now,
I adjourn. Or I move that we adjourn. Sorry.
Second.
motion been made and seconded. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll close the meeting, 8:53. Thank you for your participation, everybody.